let's talk about those 3 episodes, because when they ended, I was like, that's it. I don't know, I feel a little bit shortchanged, like everything they showed in the coming up on section of the last 6 episodes. Like, we just needed to see that. Like, I almost didn't learn any new information, even though I'm here with, like, pages, or not pages, but, like, a couple of paragraphs here of notes to talk about. But really, overall, my main takeaway is none of these people should be together, more than I think any other season of Love is Blind that I've watched. And people are really mad at Chelsea. But let me tell you right here, right now, baby, I support women's rights and I support women's wrongs. I don't know, I just find it so funny when people get so up in arms about, like, men being tricked. Like, it's quite possibly the worst thing one could ever do is trick a man. I'm like, as a woman, do you understand the type of things that we worry about when we go into relationships? Like, I don't know, assault, abuse, etc., etc. And men are like, I was tricked. I was tricked. Like, oh my god, big whoop. And I also disagree. Like, you know, people are in the comment section like, Chelsea is desperate, Chelsea's this, Chelsea's that, and fine, okay, whatever, but where is that energy for Jimmy? Because he proposed to a woman and is now, like, basically ignoring her, thinking about another woman, you know, basically saying all the right things, being like, but I love you the most, and this and that, when we all know that's not true. So why is it so bad for Chelsea to have, quote unquote, tricked him, when I don't think she tricked him? She didn't come in there and say, hey, by the way, I look like Megan Fox. He said, do you have any people who resemble you? And she was like, oh, well, people do say. And, like, maybe now that I've seen Chelsea talking to her friends, and she was saying, like, Jimmy was a hot commodity and blah, 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 I can see that little bit of competitiveness that a few people mentioned, which I didn't know where people were getting that idea from. I don't know if they were just making assumptions that Chelsea saw that Jimmy and Jessica were hitting it off, and Jessica was hot, and she was like, well, I want the hottest girl's man. I don't know where people got that idea from. But at the same time, like, is that really any different than what Jimmy is doing now after seeing what Jessica looked like and chasing her? So I just find the whole thing, I'm like, obviously Love is not blind is really the only takeaway. And I don't think she tricked him necessarily. Like, I think it was definitely a bad idea to do what she did. I would never recommend any woman do that. And say that you even resemble Megan Fox, but, like, she does kind of look like old Megan Fox before she had a bunch of work done. It's not the craziest thing in the world. People tell me I look like people all the time, and I'm like, I don't see it at all. I would be careful if I was on a dating show and saying that or whatever, but again, like, she did not fully trick him. That was one small conversation. If a man is going to make a decision to get married to somebody off of something like that, if that's going to be the make or break, then you get what you get, Jimmy. I don't know what to tell you. So their whole thing has been very interesting to watch. I think it's also a great example of people love to throw out things like anxiously attached. She's so this, she's that. I'm like, doesn't she have a reason to be? Wouldn't you be anxious if you were in this situation? Like, I hope and pray I'm never in a situation like that again. But like I said last time, this is somebody who chose somebody to get married to. And now she's hearing things like, you know, oh, he looked at her picture and now he's treating me different. He called her clingy, like all these different things. That is a reason to feel anxious. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't, then, I mean, good for you, but, like, anxiety exists for a reason. And if you're not feeling reassured, it's not like he's doing everything possible. And, like, of course, she has her walls up and she has her own issues too. And I think that's kind of a big thing from all of these relationships that I'm noticing is that it's just a mismatch. None of these people are necessarily bad people, but when you end up in these relationships and you're triggering each other, or you're not able to actually work through conflict or anything like that, then that's where the issues arise. And then it just makes people seem bad when it's really just a situation of, like, you are not on the same page. You have different expectations. You communicate differently. Like, I just thought it was so interesting. I really did appreciate, however, Jimmy apologizing. Early in any relationship, you're gonna have to figure out this kind of stuff about how you deal with conflict. Some people run away. Some people need to talk about it over and over. Some people have a hard time apologizing. Some people do this. Some people are silent treatment, X, Y, Z. In every relationship, there's going to be conflict, and the healthiest ones learn how to deal with the conflict. But everybody is way too riled up to get there right now. So I did appreciate Jimmy apologizing. I definitely do think he's overcompensating by saying, like, I told you I loved you more than anyone else, and this and that. Like, making these comparisons is not, again, it's actions and words matching up. But on top of that, it needs to actually be true, you know? And I think Jimmy's lying to himself a little bit. You have to kind of also remember, like, we're on a show here, so he feels like the need to get to the wedding. Anybody can kind of get along. That doesn't mean that this is his number one pick, but he can get along with Chelsea, but it's not the one for him. When we move down a little bit later with Chelsea talking to her friends and that whole thing, and the way Jimmy felt about her roommate, I was like, I just, again, feel this is not a match, because he was like, oh, her energy is too much, da 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 da. I'm like, that's kind of what your girlfriend is like. Her roommate seems similar to her friends seem similar to her, and even in the way that they communicate with her, like the way she jokes around and things like that, like he's just always kind of like nodding along and doesn't ever seem that interested. And like, I've dated a guy like Jimmy. I remember having to tell my boyfriend to say bye to me at the door, you know? Like, these things are not, for me, normal. These are not things that I feel comfortable in a relationship with. Other people might, and that's great, but they need to date that type of person, not me. So, you know, whether or not he kissed her twice or didn't, or any of those little minute details, either way, at the end of the day, she is not feeling reassured. He feels like he's doing everything, and they're still not able to get anywhere. And that, to me, says it's time to shut it down. Quickly to Brittany and Kenneth. This is interesting because the first conversation they had, actually, one of the last conversations I watched them have, I was like, the way they talk feels so, like they're saying the right things. They're really communicating, if not over communicating, but there's no emotion. There's no true connection between the two of them. So I thought that the conversation was really interesting. It was very mature. And like I've already said, I love the actions and words things, but again, it can still be so subjective. So I really like that he asked, like, what does good look like to you? Because that's the thing. It's like, oh, I told you I loved you, but to some people that's not enough, right? To some people they need to feel it in a different way or whatever that may be. So I thought that was a really interesting conversation that they had. It seemed strained at first, and then the way, of course, he's on his phone and very busy. This whole work and phone thing is very interesting because, like, you know, you're coming in from being in this literal kind of honeymoon state to now truly back to the real world, and you really get a better idea. People can put on a facade for a couple of days, for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, right? And I think that's why we kind of, like, you know, actually date people and experience them before we get married. But that's not what we're doing today. By the time they got to their conversation and ended things, like, obviously she was really upset. He's emotionless. But it was amicable to some degree, and it didn't go any further. So I appreciate that. I think that's what should happen. Now let's talk about Clay and AD. This is interesting. I don't know if it's me, but I feel like her tone has just been like, yeah. And it's just her in her head being like, oh my God, what have I done? I can't listen to this man anymore. Like, I think Clay seems like he's fun for a minute or for a moment, but I don't think he's ever really gotten there with anybody. We could sort of tell that by his apartment. Like, there was no touch of a woman. A woman has maybe never even stayed overnight there. You know, that's the vibe I kind of got from that apartment. Which, by the way, I want to see AD's apartment. Like, why didn't we get to see her place? It was interesting. But AD asked him, like, what's on his mind when they're sitting at that table, and then he says what's on his mind, and then she's upset about it. She's like, well, you switched it up completely, and blah, blah, blah. And I understand why she was upset and what he had to say, but he's being very honest. And I think men do this a lot, where they'll be like, I'm not good enough for you. I'm scared I'm going to cheat on you. I'm scared I'm going to this. I'm scared I'm going to that. Listen to that. Listen to that kind of thing. Because as much as he's saying, like, I want to avoid it and everything like that, like, for me, and due to my own comfort level in a relationship, I don't think I'd be able to proceed in the way that he's discussing it, amongst a bunch of other stuff that he said. But I felt like when she was sitting at that table, like, you could see the ick building in her. And it was like, the level of production that they're starting to put into this, it was like Housewives or The Office, watching them zoom in on her face while she's just like, I don't know. I kind of feel like she's over it, but it was interesting hearing Clay open up about his father and his life, and you can kind of see why he does feel the way he does. And that's totally admirable, but I just don't think he's there yet. I don't think he's ready for marriage with anybody. He needs a little bit of time. to marinate and learn some things. I got a little worried at first when AD met Clay's family, because I was like, oh, is this one of those situations where the mom and sister are going to be super protective over him? It's kind of giving me that vibe at first, but his mom seemed very fair between the two of them when they were sort of discussing their issues. Clay, to me, looked like a kid. Like, he looked like a kid who was throwing a tantrum, and he was kind of like, and like sitting back in his chair. It's so unattractive to me. And it's kind of interesting. It was like the tables turned for a second there. Like, AD was sort of in the hot seat about her job and what you do all day and where you're working, and then she's turning around and saying, I'm not getting enough time, and he's like, well, I'm working to support us. Like, this is tale as old as time. And you know, some people feel that providing for is money. Some people feel providing for is being there and being in person and things like that. But I'm like, you guys are talking about putting a kid in this house? Let's relax. Let's relax on that. You guys aren't ready to raise a child. But I think Clay is going to have a really hard time prioritizing her, compromising at all. Like, if you've never been in a relationship, if you were, you know, it seems like he was, you know, raised by both of his parents, but like, it doesn't seem like he had to compromise much. And I think this is really starting to show that. And again, like, the push and pull, the balance, the power dynamics, or whatever, in any relationship, it takes time to work that kind of thing out. And that's not to say, well, I don't think any of these guys are really a good suit, but that's not to say if these guys had met outside of this that they might have been able to figure that out. But when you're put in this pressure cooker of like, figure it all out right now, you don't have that time. Amy and Johnny have finally given me something to talk about. I don't know if these people are not talking about these things in the pod, or they brush over it, and then when they get into these, you know, the more real-time home situations, that they decide to then have these conversations. But these are the conversations you should be having while in the pod before you put a ring on someone's finger, okay? Because they're like, yeah, we're totally on the same page. We're totally on the same page, while saying something exactly different. Literally, Johnny is saying he wants to save, he wants to be frugal, he wants to retire at 50. Amy is saying, yeah, I love that, but I want to live in the moment and like blah, 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 blah. But we want the same thing. I'm like, do you? Because he's basically saying, also, if you got pregnant, I don't want to keep the baby. And she's saying, if I got pregnant, we can make it work. And then here they are both saying, but we are on the same page. And this is the problem, is there with sometimes straight relationships, I feel like. Because I watched this show, like I watched an old season of Love is Blind, the first one. If you remember Kelly and Ken or something, Kenny. They were like very boring, barely memorable, but the only thing that did stick out to me was that they bonded over the fact that they both read the book I Love You Forever. Most people would have read that book as a kid, you know, so if you guys are going to bond over like being so similar, and it's anything to do with like entertainment or like decor preferences or songs or books or plays or sports teams or whatever, that's great. But what you really should be aligned on is values, your future, what you want out of life. Like, those are the conversations you need to have in the pod. And then when you get out of the pod, you can be like, oh my god, great, we like the same show. Because when I started dating women, like, I noticed how much more deep things went at first. We didn't do any surface level. You know, I could be a little while into something with somebody and then finally asking, oh, by the way, what do you even do for work? Because that doesn't matter, right? Like, obviously if someone, well, of course, like, someone could have a horrible job, but in general, those aren't the kind of things that are important. What's important is like what you believe in and what you want out of life, and how you want to spend your money, and how you see the world, and your politics, your religion, like all the things that people say like, ooh, we shouldn't be talking about it. Children, those are the things to talk about, so that when you do get into the relationship, you're aligned on that, and then everything else is just like a cherry on top, or you can share those new parts of yourself with them, but you're not having to convince somebody or try and compromise on your values. And that's what can lead to resentment and those high divorce rates. So I just find it really interesting when people are like, oh my god, we have so much in common, and it's the most surface level things ever. Or they're both just hot, you know? So I'm like, no wonder it didn't work out. So I do feel a little nervous for them on that front. They feel a little head in the clouds, but when we got to meet Johnny's family, I thought that was really special. Like, she seemed to fit in with them really well. It made me like him more. And I thought that looked good. It will be interesting seeing how it goes with her father. It's going to be a little bit of a different situation, but it did make me kind of like him a little bit more and feel a little bit better about them. And I do feel like if they do end the relationship, it will be amicable? Question mark? I don't know. Maybe I'm nuts. Let's talk about Jeramy, okay? That little scoundrel. I really liked the conversation that they had when they first got out on the dock post Bean Dip, and a lot of people were more appalled by the Bean Dip thing, which I get. Like, obviously, no man should be going up to a woman and touching her Bean Dip. Like, I wasn't saying that that's okay. What I was saying was the way that he went about it, where he basically said, like, when they showed the flashback, he said, like, and you know, I'm not team Jeramy here. I'm calling him Jeramy, by the way, because he has an A where there should be an E, in my opinion. But he didn't go up to AD and say, like, hey, Laura told me to bean dip you. It was like, oh, by the way, Laura told me about bean dip, which is just, like, in my opinion, was him trying to, like, bond and be like, oh, yeah, I heard what you girls were talking about. Like, this is some common whatever. It's like, I heard this is what silliness you guys were up to, and, like, she told me to do it to you. Like, you shouldn't have added that. Not appropriate. And I don't think that AD had a bad reaction by saying I said she had a bad reaction. I don't mean she had a bad reaction in that her reaction was the wrong one. It was that she didn't like it. Like, her reaction was like, I don't like that, as opposed to a good reaction where she would, like, laugh or something. She's fully in the right to have whatever reaction she wanted, but Clay's reaction seemed, like, more possessive over like, concern for AD, and then that made me feel like now AD is feeling concerned because Clay is seeming like a little possessive mad, but who knows? Either way, I liked the conversation that they had because it really felt like Jeramy took ownership, he took accountability, he apologized, and I'm like Laura in the sense that I need to talk things out and really understand where the other person was coming from, hope that they understand and explain where I'm coming from, so that we're on the same page, because not only do I want to resolve this situation, but I want to give that person the information so that moving forward, they know more about how I work and I know more about how they work, so we can, you know, understand each other's intent, and that try to prevent things like this from happening moving forward and things, because, like, things are going to happen. Obviously, his reaction of silent treatment was not good, and he apologized for that. And what I did really like was that, you know, she wanted to continue talking about it, asking him questions, and so many people can get so defensive and feel attacked when you, like, bring up something that happened, whether it was in the past or the day before or whatever. They immediately are like, oh, no, I don't, and then you did this and that and whatever, and he didn't give that. So I did really appreciate that. Do I feel that that's sort of, like, I don't feel that that's bare minimum in a relationship, but that's, like, what I really, really admire in a person. To be able to talk it out and really reflect and reassure her. So that was great. But what I think is ironic is that they do and all of the couples do this, and I've been in dating situations like this too, where you do so much talking about how you want to communicate and how you should, but when it comes down to it, you don't. Because then turn around to the end of the third episode where he's basically icing her out, doing the same thing, and that's what he does in conflict, and we've now learned that, right? So it's one thing to be like, yeah, I'm so sorry, but if you continue doing it over and over, you're kind of like, oh, well. So when Laura and Jessica met up, I thought that was very interesting and such an, ironic conversation to have Jessica going on and on about Jimmy, how much she loves Jimmy, and I'm sure people are going to love that she did a name slip, he did a name slip, and be like, they're meant to be together. No, they shouldn't be together. I don't think that Jessica and Jimmy should be together. I think Jessica deserves someone who isn't going to pick her just off of her looks, and, you know, like, she's literally like, I'll just close my eyes and listen to him talk. You deserve someone who, like, you know, is a hot-ass man who's going to appreciate you and who wants to be a father, not who's just picking you because, you know, you look like a Kardashian or Megan Fox or whatever. So when they're having this conversation and Jessica's, like, going on and on and on, and then Laura's like, oh yeah, by the way, Sarah messaged my man, like, and I'm like, isn't Jessica doing the same thing to Jimmy? Like, no, she didn't message him, but she has full intent to see him. She still likes him. She's basically saying she's prettier than Chelsea. So, like, you know, it's kind of the same thing, because, like, Chelsea wouldn't like that the same way you don't like someone talking to your man who they had, like, a dating experience with. So I'm kind of like, okay, that's interesting. Like, at this point, I feel like Jessica just wants, like, it's getting a little competitive. Like, I don't think it's bringing out the best of anybody, I'll say that. But I do really feel like, back to Jeramy and Laura, that they're just passive aggressive towards each other, and it's not like the cute kind of bickering. Like, yeah, couples bicker totally. They pick on each other, you do little things like that, whatever. But this to me feels beyond that. It feels tense, and it feels like it's one wrong joke away from an argument. And they don't seem comfortable and relaxed around each other. Like, I think that Laura definitely still has her guard up. I think Jeramy has so many guards up. Like, we saw what his apartment looked like. Like, I thought serial killer at the moment she said it. I was like, that is too clean. Although I do know people like that, and I feel like people that I've tended to date tend to be very minimalistic, and I am not. Okay, I've got tchotchkes, I've got shit everywhere. Okay, I'm looking at a mini sombrero on top of my paper towel roll at this very moment. I've got a disco ball with a Barbie hanging from it. So I'm not one for minimalist style. So I'm also, you know, navigating that in a relationship right now myself, because my girlfriend is very minimalist. But the way, like, Jeramy, when you're telling me that you're gonna go meet up with this girl, turn your location on, this whole thing, lie about it, blah, blah, blah. No. Oh, so reassuring to you, I turned on my location. No. Okay? What you do, if you are going to go have this conversation, you find out that that woman is there, to be like that's oh, please. Like, okay, we're all friends here, okay? I know with certainty that I have found out that, like, somebody I was seeing was at a bar or something like that, and then be like, no, I'm not going to let them stop me from having a good time, but damn well, I'm going in there knowing that I want to see them, right? Like, because you like them. But I know that if I was in a situation right now when I'm in a relationship with somebody who I love and I care about, and if there was somebody there, like, let's say we did Love is Blind and ended up in this relationship, and I found out that the other person was there, I would absolutely not go. I would not put myself in that position. I would ask my friends to meet me somewhere else. Totally possible. If you do need to have this conversation with Sarah, then you set up a time in the light of day at a cafe or, like, the least sexy place possible, and you go do that. You don't, like, not text, come home at 5 a.m., blah, 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 shut down. And this is exactly what I said in the last episode of this, where I said, you know, he said he's a logical guy. And then it just comes off as cold and emotionless. And that's a hard place to be. And I really do feel for Laura. I think Jeramy is dead wrong for that. He can have Sarah. Who cares? Neither of them, like, I don't really get it. I think Sarah just wants to win. And I think Jeramy, as much as he's like, yeah, like, we love picking on each other and stuff, I don't think he actually likes it. But yeah, I can't really say that I'm on anyone's team at this moment. But I am so excited to see Trevor come back. I mean, in reality as well, they all have to be a little nutty to go on this show. Like, at this point, maybe the people in the first, second season, but at this point, you kind of have to have a little something going on or not up top to be joining a show like this. So I just hope that these next episodes deliver, because that was a scam to make us wait a week to see exactly what already happened in the promo. Like, not one new thing happened. We already saw all of it, pretty much. Anything that was exciting or interesting. So I don't have that much else to say about it. I'm a little disappointed. I hope no one gets married. And my camera cut me off, but basically I was saying everyone sucks and I hope no one gets married. But thank you so much for watching. Be sure to leave your comments and thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!